Voting begins, but where will it end? Welcome to Columbus on the Record. Voting month has arrived in Ohio. Early voting began on Tuesday. The first day featured a fairly robust turnout, no surprise there. This week, the presidential campaign featured candidate appearances mostly on non-mainstream media programs. A major hurricane, Milton, came ashore in Florida. Hurricane Helene cleanup and the battle against misinformation continues in North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. Former President Obama hit the campaign trail for Kamala Harris. And here in Ohio, two new polls show President Trump maintaining a 6 to 7 point lead, which is close to his margins of victory in 2016 and 2020. So, Darrell Rowland, the poll makes sense, except when you go back to 2020 and the day before the election, Joe Biden was tied with Donald Trump. Does this mean Trump's going to win by 15 points now?
Who knows? Polls are a snapshot in time. Yes. We're a month out from the election. They're not predictive.
But that was the day before the election.
Now I got my pollster disclaimers. I was surprised that it was only 6, to be honest with you. And it was 6 in both the Washington Post poll and the Marist poll that were out. So, sure, he could be 8. Sure, very often Trump underpolls his supporters for whatever. Do not tell pollsters. They don't show up in polls sometimes. What I was most surprised at was that Trump was only up by 6, but yet Sherrod Brown is only up by 1. I believe Mr. Clegg has said on this show before about Trump being in double digits and, Brown would be swamped. And now Trump is only up 6, and he's barely clinging. So an interesting, lots of parts still moving debate in the election season we're in.
So, Bob, the one poll I saw was ActiVote. No matter how reputable ActiVote is,
they're not reputable.
But it's listed in the 538 and stuff. But the lead, looking at their two polls, one in August, one in late October, the lead was cut in half for Trump. He went from 12 to 6. So the same outlet had his lead cut in half. Is it narrowing here?
No, it's not narrowing here. I think actually he's going to end up right around 12%. I think he's going to do a little bit better than he has done in both. He was around 8 points both in 2016 and 2020. Darrell, you are correct. I have this theory, and I don't know if you want to talk about the Senate race now or later.
Yeah, we'll talk to it in a few minutes. Let's focus on
presidential. On the presidential, I think, if anything, he's stronger here in Ohio. I don't think Kamala Harris is as strong of a candidate as either Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden was back in 2020. So I think the president's going to do a little bit better than he has in the past.
Now, Morgan, in 2020, Joe Biden really didn't even step foot in Ohio, didn't advertise here. So it was surprising that he was tied late in those polls. Kamala Harris is running ads in Ohio. They could be national ads that are popping up on TV, but she's running some ads here. Will it be more competitive than it has in the past couple cycles?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to say. I mean, this has been obviously an unprecedented election. And, and the other key point about Kamala Harris is I don't think she was that well known to a lot of voters in Ohio. But that's an opportunity as well, especially as you were referencing in this month-long blitz that we're all about to experience. She's going on a lot of untraditional media platforms, the podcast that a lot of young women watch, going to target a lot of black voters. And so, as they get exposed to her, if that has a positive impact, I think there is an unknown upside to all of that, and the potential is there for a better performance.
This is Donald Trump's third bid for the presidency. Mm-hmm. Fatigue has to set in at some point. I mean, Al Gore faced it when he ran after 4 years of Bill Clinton. Bush after 4 years of Reagan, the first Bush, and then him running. Voters at some point want change, right? Could that be a factor here, or does Trump push fatigue aside?
Trump is different in a lot of ways. I'll just say that. He's a very unique candidate. We probably never had one as unique in our lifetime, but he represents something to a lot of people. Trump is not only a candidate, but he's also an idea to a lot of people. And a lot of people who want to return to what they see as Christian values or a moral nation or whatever, we're going to code that the talk is these days. They see Trump as the person who can make that happen. And so it's bigger than Trump himself.
I was intrigued in the Washington Post poll. They also ask about Springfield, and it's kind of a who do you believe on this? You know, Donald Trump, who talks about eating the neighbor's pets and all that, or Mike DeWine saying, you know, there's no evidence for that. Only 24% are believing Donald Trump, and DeWine has a decent majority that believe him that that's not happening, and that Haitians can be productive citizens. I mean, they sort of grouped 3 different topics in one question, so it's a little unwieldy to see what people were actually responding to. But Trump does not have the credibility on that one issue. Is that going to affect a statewide race? It's hard to believe, but I don't know.
What can Democrats hang their hat on, Morgan? What would give Democrats hope that the margin will be smaller than it was the past 2 cycles here in Ohio?
Well, I mean, I think a key thing here, and just on my way over, I was listening to commentary on the race, and they were saying, it's very important that Kamala Harris targets the center, the mythical center, whatever that is. But getting to what makes Trump somewhat appealing, I do think part of it is some of these ideas he throws out, like we're just going to cap how much you can be charged on your credit card, those types of fees. Those are not center ideas as they are traditionally thought of. Those are ideas that are a little bit more in the populist direction. Those are ideas that speak to a wide range of the middle class. And I don't think that Kamala Harris should shy away from the things that they've done in this administration that are exactly on that track. And making sure that that messaging is letting not only the voters of Ohio that tend to care a lot about that clearly, but in a lot of these swing states know that they are on the side of taking on some of this concentrated economic power, I think could have really important gains.
So what do you see, Bob, when you see we're going to make auto interest tax deductible,
Yep.
auto loan interest tax deductible, things like capping credit card? Those are very populist things. Is he throwing stuff against the wall, trying to just seal the deal, or what is he doing?
No, because this goes back to the question you just asked with Joe. Like, how can a guy that's running for the 3rd time for the presidency be the change candidate? Because of all these different ideas he's throwing out there. And that's what I think he understands about this race. People want change. He's throwing these ideas out to create that change or to show change. Kamala Harris, I mean, just this week with her various media interviews, they're asking her, how are you going to be different than Joe Biden? And she's just not able to answer that question. Now, that's amazing because you would think that her people would have talked about it, prepped her for it, but people want change, and you as the candidate have to explain how you're going to do that.
Yeah, the New York Times poll last week said that she now is, according to their survey, is the change candidate. Again, she's only been running for 2 months. Maybe that could be the problem with her anyway. We'll see how this turns out. Senator J.D. Vance continues to campaign hard for former President Trump in battleground states. He continues to make appearances on Sunday morning talk shows. He has 2 scheduled for this weekend. Politico had a story this week saying Vance has been, quote, conspicuously absent from Ohio campaigns since his nomination for vice president. His image is not on ads or on TV spots for Republican congressional candidates or Senate candidate Bernie Moreno. At least one national Republican leader had expressed hope that Vance would help candidates like Derek Merrin, the Republican who's trying to unseat longtime Democratic Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur up in the Toledo area, but a recent poll has Kaptur up by 10 points. Bob Clegg, obviously, J.D. Vance is focused nationally. Yeah. He's visiting Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona. But should he be helping local Republican candidates? Do they want his help?
I don't know if he can help because, to be honest with you, look who his running mate is. And we're talking about Donald Trump again. He just sucks all the oxygen out of the room. I mean, these candidates are going to want to be associated with Donald Trump, okay? It's not, J.D. Vance, sure, he's from Ohio. He's our U.S. Senator, great guy, love him. But he's running for vice president. It doesn't have the juice that, being endorsed by Donald Trump has. And that's where you're going to see Bernie, you're going to see all those congressional candidates. It's all going to be about Trump because Trump is the one that everybody, it appeals to. So,
and Darrell, he's only been in office not even 2 years, J.D. Vance.
Right.
So he's still a newcomer for a lot of people here.
Right, and obviously this was his first elective office, U.S. Senate. So, aside from being a famous author, probably people didn't know much about him. Perhaps even forgotten hillbilly elegy.
Yeah. Marcy Kaptur, do you believe that poll that she's up by 10? Her district has more red than it used to be. That's the big factor up there. And she has a candidate that hasn't burn Trump's name in his front lawn.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do have some figures in our party, in the Democratic Party, that have a reputation that precedes this Trump era that they are able to benefit from. And Marcy Kaptur fits in that. Getting back to J.D. Vance, I think also we've seen she was able to kind of make a mockery of him, when that strike scene where she was like, first time JD, and he was like, yeah, first time Marcy. J.D. Vance is not a guy of the grassroots. He is not a guy of the working class. Yes, he comes from a disadvantaged background, but he is firmly ensconced in the elite of the United States of America and the global elite at this point, and that is where he is most comfortable. So it's no surprise to me that he'd be doing cable news interviews on the weekends and staying as far away from Ohio as possible as he tries to make his way to the White House.
The ticket splitters is what the Democrats are hoping for, because Trump is a heavy favorite to win the top of the ticket in Ohio, but Marcy Kaptur, Sherrod Brown need to peel off some of those voters, those Trump voters.
And there have been ticket splitters in the past. If you look at Senator Brown when he's run, there have been people who have split to go over there. You've got to remember that when you're talking the working class, the unions, the people who work on assembly lines, those kind of things, a lot of them see Sherrod Brown as a guy who stood with them, who has helped them through everything. Same with Marcy Kaptur. We're talking about her on the picket lines with them, helping him out. And so that makes them more, they might vote for Trump at the top of the ticket, but that makes them more likely when they go down that ticket to go over there and vote for some Democrats.
That Bowling Green poll from last week, Bob, said that only 2% of Republicans would vote for Kamala Harris, but 8% of Republicans would vote for Sherrod Brown. So that's what Sherrod Brown is hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be his big problem. Sherrod has never run statewide when a Republican wins the state by a big margin.
Yeah.
The biggest margin was George Voinovich in '90 when he won the governor's race by 5 points, and that was Sherrod's one and only loss when he was running for re-election for Secretary of State.
Who managed that campaign, by the way, Bob?
I did. Thank you, Daryl. I wasn't going to mention that. But I mean, seriously, he's never had a Republican leading the ticket by 10 or 12 or even 8. And I think, the Marino campaign understands this, and I think you're going to get reminders in the final weeks here that Sherrod Brown voted not once but twice to convict Donald Trump when he was impeached. And Trump voters are a little different than like Mike DeWine voters, because we saw a lot of Mike DeWine voters vote for Tim Ryan just 2 years ago. Because DeWine won by 20 and Ryan only lost by 6. I think the Trump voter is a little different than that DeWine voter.
Speaking of last-minute reminders, almost all of the Sherrod Brown ads and the group supporting him now, Morgan, are focused on reproductive rights and Bernie Moreno's shifting position on abortion. Now he favors a 15-week restriction, but before he was strictly anti-abortion. The gender gap is very pronounced here in Ohio between Bernie Moreno has a 2-point lead among men. Sherrod Brown has like 11 or 12-point lead among women. So that's why you see a lot of suburban women in these ads.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, for Sherrod to be successful here, to narrow that gap in the presidential that we were talking about before, we have to see big turnout from women. I think another number that's come out that is also somewhat disconcerting on our side is just how the gap has narrowed with black voters between both these candidates. And so name of the game, final month, turnout, targeting, and making sure that we get where I think a lot of voters we see in Ohio are more on the independent side of things, that they know what these differences are and that they're willing to show up and protect their rights.
Is it the economic issues, Daryl, is what's holding back people from voting for Kamala Harris or saying they're going to vote for Kamala Harris now? Because inflation is cooled, but it was really hot for the first part of Biden's administration.
Yeah, and to say inflation has cooled, that just means, of course, the prices are increasing more slowly than they were. You still have that grocery basket effect that people are seeing when they buy eggs or buy things like that. Maybe some of those prices have gone down, but you still you get the receipt at the end. It's like, man, I only have half a basket. And it's like that much. I think that sticker shock is still there. And I think the contention that Kamala Harris is quote unquote too liberal for Ohio, and that's kind of a cliche. A very generalization, but I still think it has some wheels to it that still flow in this state. In part because Ohio back in the day, 10 years ago, there were many Democrats over the Mahoning Valley, other areas of Ohio. A lot of Democrats, but fewer liberal Democrats.
Yeah, they were
for a statewide race.
Conservative Democrat, Reagan Democrats.
Yeah, that was the most common label.
Yeah.
And the Democratic Party, whether it's their fault or not, they've lost a lot of them. And those formerly reliably blue counties in eastern Ohio, the Mahoning Valley, far northeast Ohio, pretty much up in the air if they're not bright red.
Yeah, we'll watch those again on election night this year, as we have the past few cycles. The Yes on Issue 1 campaign is out with a new ad. This one features an Army veteran saying he supports having an independent commission draw legislative and congressional districts. This comes as some have questioned whether the amendment would preclude military members from serving on the redistricting commission, because the amendment would prohibit, quote, appointive federal, state, or local officials from serving. Supporters of the amendment say appointive officials are top officials appointed by the president, governor, or local jurisdictions, not police, fire, or military officials. Joe Ingles, but the ad is out there, so it's, again, they're trying to counter the arguments that are out there in the wind that military folks can't serve, or that this amendment will dilute the power of minority congressional districts.
And I've talked with Chris Davey, who's with Citizens Not Politicians. He says that this is an insidious, blatantly incorrect rumor that the anti-Issue 1 folks are spreading to try to plant some doubt, to try to plant some misinformation in the minds of voters. You've got to remember this is a complicated issue, and people are maybe, trying to figure it out. The language of the amendment itself refers to people who are elected and appointed, not people who are hired. But let's face it, the anti-Issue 1 side, they really benefit by getting out there, whether it's true or not. If they think they can confuse this issue, they benefit by doing so, because confused voters tend to vote no.
But Darrell, the ads out there, there must be some concern on the yes side that this issue is taking some hold.
Yeah, I think that's something that could take legs. If you're banning veterans, and some versions say police officers, firefighters, things of that nature, and who knows how many, you're wiping all those people out along with the dreaded politicians from this process. Why is that fair? So yeah, I think you want to shoot that down. And I talked to Maureen O'Connor, who wrote the thing. Now there could always be unintended consequences, but she insists up and down there's no way that's a valid interpretation. And if it passes, of course, some judge somewhere will decide all that for us.
But the problem is the no side, to get this issue out and other issues like this, they have to get on TV, and they don't have the money.
Yeah, the whole crux of issue campaigns is education, and education means spending a lot of money on TV. The yes side has a lot of money, almost 90% of it out of state. I won't even talk about out of country. That's a different story. Yeah, so I mean, they have the money to put up this ad to refute a rumor that's out there. I mean, that's what's amazing. They have enough money that they can even put up an ad that is not even something that's being put on TV against them. It's just a rumor that's out there.
You're hearing it. Insiders are talking about this, and maybe it's spreading among police forces, on veterans and VFW halls and things like that. I don't know, Morgan.
Yeah, I think you really have to put some work, and even someone who follows politics quite closely like I do, put some work into even understanding what the no on Issue 1 side is and what they mean by their critiques of Issue 1. Not where you want to be. That's several layers of interpretation and persuasion that I don't think is going to be enough. And I wanted to speak too to the idea that somehow we'll have less black representation. I mean, wow, that's quite pernicious. That the only way that we could be able to preserve black representation is by having gerrymandered districts and an inability to win fairly drawn districts by black candidates.
But it went to court in Michigan because folks felt that they were eroding black districts in the Detroit area.
Civil Rights Act.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really think that based on the level of support that we're seeing, based on the amount of time that it has taken to get this issue on the ballot, so many people identify this issue with, this is about removing politicians from our political process, and even hardcore MAGA folks are probably going to be supportive of that.
That was a question I had talk about ticket splitters. If people are angry right now, Bob, at politicians and might vote for Trump, this is a way to be angry at other politicians like Mike DeWine, Frank LaRose, you know, the Senate president and the House leaders.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a release valve for some of that. But the no people are trying to hook this up closely with Donald Trump. So, I mean, that's about as best as you can go. If you can get the connection, Donald Trump doesn't think this is a good idea for Ohio, vote no, they might have a good shot at it.
That may be the only shot. That may be the only shot.
Yeah, and the thing about issue 1, if you look at it, it does have safeguards in it. And I would advise everyone to read the amendment. Go to
How much time do they have, Joe?
Well, you
It's
know
long.
what?
That's the thing. You're asking
And
a lot.
it's a process thing, which people don't care about process.
Well-
This is the biggest problem with issue 1.
But the thing is that being a voter requires a little bit of responsibility on your part.
Yeah.
And I think if you're not, you know, if you're not sure about things, you should go read the actual amendments and figure out from there. And you see that when you do read that amendment, there are a lot of safeguards in there.
Do you believe the polls, Daryl, that it's got 60% yes right now?
Polling on statewide ballot issues is very dicey, especially this far out. Now, if the no sides don't have money to counter it, I don't know. Because I've personally taken polls on issues that looked like they were going to pass, and then you get some late ads. They can shift incredibly quickly. And I think Joe's observation is very astute. It's like you don't have to make the case necessarily to vote no. Just confuse the vote yes. It's like you don't have, if you're a defense attorney, you don't have to prove your client is innocent.
Yeah.
You know, just put that degree of doubt in the jury's mind, and you know the verdict may go your way. And it may be the same, maybe a parallel here in the election.
And that's where turnout in grassroots organizations may, if some of that money is being spent on that, not just TV ads, might help as well. It's not getting as much attention as issue 1 or the U.S. Senate race, but the Ohio Supreme Court has a lot riding on this election. Voters will decide nearly half of the seats on the court. 3 of the 7 justices are on the ballot. Democratic incumbent Michael Donnelly faces Republican challenger Megan Shanahan. Democratic incumbent Melody Stewart faces Republican challenger Joseph Deters, who is also an incumbent, but he's running for a different seat with a longer term. Deters' seat features a contest between Democrat Lisa Forbes and Republican Dan Hawkins. Morgan Harper, the Democrats are running as a slate, it seems, because there are D's and R's next to their names now. What do you think of that strategy? Is that the only way they could win?
Well, I think it also probably connects to just how much money has been raised and being able to pool resources. And speaking of education, I mean, we have a big educational challenge on our hands for people to know that there is a state Supreme Court, what these seats mean, why they matter, how it's different from the federal Supreme Court. So I think it does make a lot of sense to try to work together on that front. But look, we can't diminish the challenge before us trying to win these seats when they are identified with certain party affiliations based on how things have been going statewide for Democrats in Ohio is going to be really, really tough.
If you were to put these names out to even the most informed voters, Bob, they might recognize the incumbents like Donnelly and Deters and Stewart, but even then it might be tough.
Even then. And then Donnelly
break
would
through?
And I've done a lot of Supreme Court races here in Ohio and even outside of Ohio. And here in Ohio, it was always about the name. And if you had an Irish name, it was that much better. That's why I think Donnelly would have had best bet. But the one thing I noticed, when you had just names, no party ID, you had about a 20 to 25% drop off from the top of the ticket vote to the Supreme Court races. When we put that party ID, drop off fell to less than 5%. So people got just enough information from that party ID that they wanted to vote in those races. So I think in the end,
up on the ballot too. Remember from that same amendment.
yeah, they moved up. But you know, I think it just. I mean, people don't like to vote when they don't know anything about the individuals, and then you know when it becomes a name game, then
The R and the D helps
Yeah.
some voters decide. But you should do your research, just like on issue 1. Do your research on the Supreme Court races. Time now for our off-the-record party shots, and Morgan Harper, you're up first.
Oh, goody. Well, we were talking about public transportation. Want to make sure everyone knows issue 47, another ballot initiative, could expand bus rapid transit in Columbus, and throughout Central Ohio, really. So do your research. seems to make a lot of sense to get faster around the region.
It's the Link Us proposal.
Link Us,
Bob.
yes.
We found out this week, longtime Congressman Dave Hobson passed away, and great guy. I knew him for almost 40 years from when he was state senator, former client, and just a good man. And I just wish we had more like him in politics.
Daryl.
You're not going to believe this, but he stole mine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Dave, no, it's all right. Dave Hobson. Here's a guy. See, these are the kind of people we would like on the redistricting commission. People of goodwill who do put the bigger picture ahead of getting reelected or whatever. That's not his primary goal in life. And he worked with Democrats and Republicans. Now he was what they call a cardinal, so he had appropriations money to give out. So he was more popular for doing that, but still. You look at the praise from, it was totally bipartisan.
Yeah. And Joe.
And I just want to say I'm sad that there's not going to be more debates this time around. And I think one of the things that's really bothering a lot of these candidates is they don't want fact checks. Well, you know, if you don't want fact checks, then, you know, that rules out debates, because debates are based on facts. And if you can't fact check a candidate, then there's a problem there, Houston. So I'm just saying that, you know, I'm really kind of fed up at not having debates.
All right.
Preach.
My off-the-record comment, go to WOSU.org. We have a great voter guide, tells you the rules for voting, how to vote, how to navigate the voting process. Check it out. Also, check out Columbus on the Record online. We can watch every episode at WOSU.org. For our crew and our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.